In the next few sections, we will look at some of the core principles of Buddhism, starting with the Four Noble Truths. As we saw from the story of the Buddha, his first sermon at the Deer Park was on the Four Noble Truths. These are set out in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, or the setting in motion of the wheel of Dharma Sutra. They are sometimes translated as the Four Ennobling Truths, as they ennoble those that understand them. The first noble truth is called the noble truth of dukkha. Dukkha is usually translated as suffering. Some use the word unsatisfactoriness, as when we think of suffering, we think of the greater sufferings, death, illness, and so forth. The Buddha did want to include this, but he also meant that our lives feel unsatisfactory. Suffering is an inevitable part of life. The second noble truth is the noble truth of origination of suffering. Suffering arises due to craving. We are not happy with the things in the here and now. If we could just have a bit more money, a new phone, a better car, then we would be happy. The more we get, the more we want. Thus we become attached to our cravings. Even as we experience joy, we feel the impermanence of the situation, like sand falling through our fingers. We experience the suffering of change. This also happens to our aversions. We don't like to hear criticism. We run from unpleasant experiences. It is our ignorance that gives rise to craving or selfish desire. This leads us to become attached to this existence. This causes increased suffering in this life and leads to us coming back again and again in samsara. Thus, the ignorance that causes us suffering is the ignorance of an impermanence, which in Sanskrit is called anicca. We behave as things are permanent. The third noble truth is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. There is a way to overcome suffering. We need to understand our ignorance that leads us to craving, attachment, and suffering. We can then find our true nature. We are no longer restricted by our ignorant views of craving and attachment to things that are impermanent. We become free. The fourth noble truth is the noble truth of the Eightfold Path. There is a path that we can follow that leads us to the cessation of suffering, the path of freedom. Realizing these truths, we can start to have control of our lives. We can see that we are the cause of our own suffering. Suffering is not given to us by someone else. Understanding the Four Noble Truths make it clear why Buddhism is seen as a path. We can see how we want more of what we enjoy and avoid what we dislike. It's like walking a tightrope, being buffeted by craving and avoidance. If we stop avoiding and craving, we can walk the tightrope in a state of calmness. We can see how a state of mindfulness can help. By being in the current moment, we are not worrying about things we've done in the past or what we should be doing in the future. We can be happy in the current moment. In his analysis, the Buddha is acting like a doctor making a prognosis. The doctor would firstly identify the illness, secondly find the cause of the illness, thirdly realize the cure to the illness, and finally prescribe a course of action that will lead to the end of the illness. Thus we can see the logic behind the Buddha's Four Noble Truths.